Awesome. Okay, great. Well, look, thanks everybody for joining. Um, really appreciate you taking the time. So excited that everybody's participating here. I hope that we're going to be able to give you a lot of great information. We started this first webinar series and just generally this expert series to try to provide some information that you may not be getting from your firms and from asset managers. Trying to focus more on some of the super relevant softer skills that aren't just pure economic updates and stuff I'm sure you're going to be getting a lot of info from, as well as from independent experts who can kind of give it to you from a more general perspective. So I'm super excited today to be joined by Fatima Zaidi. She's the co-founder of Quill, the world's first one-stop marketplace where podcasters can find vetted expert freelancers who will save them time, improve their podcast quality, and help grow their audience. She's an expert in PR, something that's obviously incredibly important right now, making sure that you are communicating with your clients, making sure you're protecting your brand, understanding how to deal with it under these strange circumstances. So we're definitely think this is an incredibly important meeting to have. Just to continue with her bio just quickly, she's a member of the National Speakers Bureau. Team has spoken at various events around the world on hacking outbound sales in any industry, leading her to keynote on world stages alongside speakers like Gary Vaynerchuk, Arlene Dickinson, and most recently Richard Branson. In addition to being a regular commenter for BNN, Bloomberg on sales and tech trends, she's a frequent contributor to publications including the Globe and Mail and Huffington Post. Over the past few years, she's won the Top 30 Under 30 award and has been named as Young Professional of the Year by Notable Life and one of Flair magazine's top 100 women. So very, very excited to have you here. Very excited to ask you a bunch of important questions.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. So what we'll do here, just to kind of kick things off, I want to start with just a couple of quick house rules, if that's okay. So if you have any questions, we just ask that you send them via the live chat. Ria, who's with us here, and who organized everything and is working with us on the marketing side and generating great ideas, things like this. She'll be happy to kind of go through. If you aren't comfortable sending it to like a general chat, feel free to message her directly, and we'll make sure that you have your questions answered. So feel free to ask at any point. I have some I'm going to ask. I'm sure once we get kicked off on things, we're going to have a ton coming through. But just make sure you you message Ria with any questions or the general chat if you're comfortable sharing. Perfect. So there we go. Well, let's just jump right in. I think right now is really important. Obviously, especially this industry is under a fair amount of focus. Once health's taken care of, I think that wealth is the next thing that's being affected. So just high-level questions to start. First off, just what are the biggest risks to businesses when it comes to messaging during this pandemic?
I think it's a great question, James. I think, I've actually been getting asked this question a lot, like how do we communicate the facts to whether it's our customers, our audience, our listeners, whoever it is that you're interacting with. And I think my number one thing is sticking to the facts and avoiding stigmatizing certain groups of people. I think it's important to remember that, it's not a plague, it's not an apocalypse, and it's one that's had a really big impact on our financial landscape and our health. But really just making sure that people are, when it comes to COVID-19, they're not spreading panic and fear, more so their advice and feedback is more constructive. I actually don't envy financial advisors during this time. I think it's an incredibly difficult and stressful time to be dealing with clients who have lost half of their money in the stock exchange. I'm one of those people. I call my financial advisor maybe 5 times a week, looking through the numbers, monitoring where we're at. Is the market going to climb up? Is the market coming back down? And, I obviously have the benefit of being younger, and I know that, eventually you just leave it and it climbs back up. But, a lot of people don't necessarily have that luxury. So really just being mindful of the fact that not everybody is in the same financial situation. I'm sure everyone's very sympathetic to the stresses that you're dealing with, but the situation unfortunately is out of everyone's control and no one is benefiting from it. We're all in this together. Very few people, maybe Pfizer is benefiting from it, but other than that, no one really is. And so just understanding that, while you are accountable for people's finances, the situation is very much outside of your circumstantial control.
I know, like I said, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's good to highlight some of the added pressures on the industry and on this space in particular. Just kind of following on to that, so when would someone want to be especially conscious of some of the risks of staying to the facts and when you're engaging with clients, like what's the sort of specific mediums or when you're communicating generally that you want to be particularly focused on this?
Yeah, so I think the important thing with media to understand is it's there to help educate people so that people understand COVID-19 better, they understand the language around it, and they understand sort of the consequences of what that could potentially look like. And so I would say some best practices are really using media, whatever form it's in, to educate whoever it is that you're dealing with. And, one thing that I've noticed is, at least not my financial advisor, and a lot of organizations that specialize in this space are not really using their platform to become thought leaders in how to support people navigate through these spaces. So if you are a writer, for example, why don't you create some resources and guides that are valuable to people rather than sitting there and taking calls every day, knowing that you can create valuable resources and guides, and whether it lives on your website, whether you're doing a webinar like this, whether you're for all of your clients, whether you're pitching to media on 10 ways to really help curb your finances or help support your finances through this difficult period, why not actually try to provide value to people in a constructive way? So I think that's the most important message right now. My company has been impacted. We've taken a huge hit, and what I've done is taken this time to really pivot and provide a lot of online resources for people who are looking to start podcasts from home. And I know everyone's on a shoestring budget right now. Everyone is financially struggling. So rather than charging people for our services, I'm actually creating free resources for people that they can tap into. And it's about providing back to our community. So in terms of languages, I would say really being mindful of the fact that financial stress is probably the first thing on people's mind, if not health. Knowing that it's not about charging or upselling or trying to make a quick buck right now, but really helping people navigate through this difficult situation. We're often afraid of the unknown, and it's really easy to associate fear with others. And so I think really if you can sort of keep those best practices in mind, people will remember you for that.
No, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I've definitely heard similar, and I think the idea generally of trying to find ways to be helpful, find ways to assist. I think reminding people that they have sets of expertise that may be unique to a lot of their clients, and then even a lot of things they're hearing very often are might be sort of commonplace knowledge for them, but people aren't thinking about it. It's something that we were alerted to by some of our clients, where they said, look, like, you're a tech company in this space. We hear a lot of tech stuff coming out all the time, but it's not necessarily going to be focused towards our advisors and our clients. So they're not going to be missing it. The same way you're hearing a ton of economic updates, you're hearing a ton about the markets, you're also hearing a ton about some other tools and ideas, and you might have your own unique ideas about how to manage finances during this time and how to provide relevant advice. And I think that reminding people that not all of their clients are going to have that same knowledge is really important, because that gives you a quick, easy win to take some info that might be real commonplace for you and add a ton of value to your clients.
Yeah, and the silver lining, or maybe the opportunity in all of this, I almost don't want to call it a silver lining, but the one opportunity that I can see from all of this is a lot of marketing tactics are now being put on hold, like events, videos, in-person meetings. And so now media more than ever have been really hungry for content. I know I'm obviously a journalist. I write for a lot of publications, and I get emails on the daily with publications looking for content around COVID-19 and how to support people through it. And so this is a huge opportunity for financial advisors and for companies who are good writers or have really good content lying around to actually pitch to media and use it as an opportunity to become thought leaders in this space. What are the 10 things that people can be doing, to help pivot their organizations? Or what are 10 things people can be doing to help get scrappy with their finances? I mean, obviously I'm not a financial advisor. I don't know the right lingo, but I know I could really benefit from these resources. And I'm sure there are a ton of, like, the Financial Post definitely has some resources coming out, but for the most part, I would say media are really looking for people to contribute articles and op-eds. I've probably been spending at least 50% of my time the last few weeks writing articles, writing content on how to support small businesses, how to support individuals, what podcasts people should be tuning into during quarantine. But, if anything, if you're not a good writer, maybe you want to start a podcast from home to communicate with your employees or communicate with your clients. Maybe you want to, create an online webinar series. But I do see an opportunity here for people to take this and pivot and form an even stronger relationships with their clientele.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think a lot of what we hear, and I think a lot of people can understand or relate to this in the industry, is that, service is kind of the big thing that wins or loses clients, and performance, despite it may be tough, everybody sort of high level understands that it's not necessarily in anybody's control. It's not something you can guarantee. You can mitigate, and obviously there's different levels of performance, but that it's not something that's kind of a guarantee that people can say, yes, for sure, this will be fine. So this is a good opportunity, being careful with that word, a good opportunity to really be a resource for your clients and show them that you're there when times are tough. Would you say, if say somebody's not a good writer, they're not comfortable, or they're kind of, which is definitely relevant in this industry, kind of hamstrung by some compliance regulations and rules like that, would doing things like maybe getting a few articles you think are really interesting or helpful that other people have written, yeah, that would be good to share with your clients as like a little guide or something?
Absolutely. I mean, the point is to provide value in whatever way that you can. You don't have to be creating completely new and novel content, but if you're out there on the internet, if you're watching BNN segments, if you're, scoping through the National Post and you see resources and articles that you think have been very well articulated, share that content with your clients. I mean, I think at the end of the day, everyone here is trying to help people during this difficult time and really calm nerves. And I think there's a lot of resources that do the opposite of what mainstream media do, which is really panic people. And I think the goal here is to really provide some reassurance that while things may not be very normal right now, eventually there will be a new normal, whether that's in 6 months, a year, and things will go back to normal. And it's just sort of riding out the wave.
No, okay, that makes a ton of sense. When you're communicating and sending a message or making a post on social media, what are some like rules or guidelines if I'm just thinking about like what's my North Star that I want to think about when I'm writing a message?
Stick to the facts. Don't spread rumors and avoid stigmatizing groups of people. It's not a plague. It's not an apocalypse. Like I said, it's not the Chinese or Asian virus, contrary to what President Trump thinks. And I think COVID-19 should not be described as spreading the virus. It should be more so about focusing on the facts of containing it, and really positive messaging and verbiage. Like, I'm really tired of opening the news these days and seeing all of this negative news and people, really spreading a lot of panic and fear. I think really the goal here should be to reassure people a little bit more. And I think that media can often help educate people. And so, why not use your area of expertise in whatever capacity it is to help reassure people rather than spread the panic. So I would say those are the sort of buzzwords I would avoid using, like virus, apocalypse, plague, things like that. So stigmatizing certain groups of people, of course. I mean, that's obviously the bare minimum. I should hope everyone knows that, but sometimes you never know. And then just really focusing on providing reassurance.
No, okay, that makes a ton of sense. And then given that there's different mediums and different sort of areas to communicate with clients, there's LinkedIn, there's Facebook if you have a presence. Obviously, those will have different levels of misinformation and panic. Are there any sort of platforms you think are the best to communicate this type of messaging through right now? Are all platforms the same in this sense? Are there any you say are probably better?
I would say, given your audience, I would look at some of the more professional platforms. Of course, I wouldn't recommend TikTok to financial advisors. So, if we're looking at the industry that you're in, probably scoping through, LinkedIn would be a really great resource. That's what I go to.
Yeah.
Twitter is another one that I'm really big on for professional use. I don't know if, Instagram is big for your industry or world. The National Post and Financial Post, BNN, all of those publications, Bloomberg. I know they're looking for a lot of content, and they're also providing a lot of content. So really using those platforms that are where your clients are going to live. And then also I would say create your own resources. Like if you have a company website, create a resource page that's specifically, targeted on towards COVID. And one thing that I think is important to mention or to note is, I know that in the line of work, a lot of your clients are in and your audience is in, they're probably getting blamed for a lot of the stress. And while they're not directly responsible, you are responsible for managing people's money. And while you can't necessarily do anything about the markets itself and how people are responding to the market and how long this virus is going to take to clear, what you can do is show people that you care, and you can show people that you are being proactive on your end, on staying in touch, being top of mind, thinking about them, providing resources. And I think the worst thing to do in a time like this is be completely hands-on and sort of wipe your hands clean and say, well, there's nothing we can do in this situation, so let's just wait it out and see. I know that personally I'm not blaming my financial advisor, but I would love to see some proactive outreach, to know that they're thinking about us, to know that they're really working hard with us to sort of like ride out the wave.
Yeah, okay, that makes a ton of sense. And I think in that space too, it's important. I think especially, we've gotten a lot of guidance on this, and I think it's really important for businesses to not be perceived as insensitive or trying to take advantage of the crisis. Obviously it's interesting. I think it's an important time right now because it's still important to grow your business. Now more than ever, businesses are under threat, and growth is what you need. And if you're losing revenue, you need to go find it, and that's natural and makes sense. And advisors can provide value by getting clients to switch to other providers, other advisors, and to be able to prospect. So how do you go about messaging best practices when going after a client of arrival, or when engaging or trying to grow your business and prospecting in this time? Because obviously you really got to stay sensitive with trying not to look like you're taking advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. It's probably my biggest pet peeve right now when I see companies emailing out and trying to profit on this situation or trying to make money off of this situation. Everyone's in a really difficult time, and just being mindful of the fact that making money should not be a priority right now, because everyone is in a situation where they're financially strapped, dealing with layoffs. It's just a lot of time of uncertainty. So making sure that your messaging is in no way, shape, or form looking to profit off of the situation, and that you're there to help. One thing that I would really recommend is, and oftentimes people think that writing articles for publications is really hard, that you have to be some sort of a journalist to write an opinion op-ed, which is an opinionated article. That's actually not true. Anyone can write an op-ed as long as it's a good article. So if you just want to write really good content that you think is valuable, you can reach out to any publication. They have a contact us section or contribute section on every website where you can reach out to their editors directly and ask them, I've written this like guide that's going to be helpful for people who are, dealing with the stresses of the money that they've lost in the stock market. And right now is probably the best time to get in with those publications, because now more than ever, people are looking for content. I mean, what else are people doing other than scrolling through the news, watching the news, and looking for content to consume in some way, shape, or form? So I would say that would be probably one thing that people should start prioritizing. And if you don't want to write, there's so many other ways, whether it's a webinar series, whether it's a blog, just impart your knowledge in some way to provide value. And by no means should you be trying to monetize.
Fair enough. I think echo some of the advice I was given. We have a sales advisor who's spent a lot of time selling to large enterprises, and he said slightly less delicately, it's the kiss of death right now if people will just not deal with you if they think you're trying to profit. once you've gotten to the point where, somebody's interested, they've reached out to you, maybe it's an inbound or something like that, like you're past that kind of initial lead, you have somebody coming in, when is it okay to start talking about some of the benefits that you have, that could be helpful, without trying to seem like, you're trying, you obviously want to be conscious of this, but at a certain point, somebody just wants to know more about your service and you do have value you can add, and maybe that value is particularly relevant right now. When's it okay to kind of broach that divide?
The best way to be a salesperson is to not be a salesperson. It was a piece of advice that I was given a very long time ago, and I've sort of like held on to it. And I think that building relationships is the best way that you can build your pipeline and your lead gen. If it's an inbound inquiry, I feel like that's a little bit different because they have reached out to you proactively and they obviously are interested in your services. I would say the monetization piece really falls in when you're doing outbound activity.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to inbound, I think it's just about like providing as much information, resources, and value as you can. And if they are interested in your services, by all means, like, someone's got to eat lunch. Like, you got to make a sale. If people are interested in your services, you shouldn't be turning away clients. But I think with outbound activity, that's when you have to be really mindful. For inbound, if people are interested in your service, go gung-ho on your CRM tool.
Yeah, sounds good. So then when it comes to, I guess, and you've sort of spoken about this, but I'm just interested, marketing more broadly then sounds like it's the more sensitive sort of space. It's outbound outreach is the minefield today. Handle your inbounds like you always handle it for the most part. Be a little bit careful when you're maybe talking about certain aspects of it, but you should be more or less okay. But when it comes to marketing, what are some of the messages that are safe? I know it's stick to the facts, but if you're trying to market, get yourself out there, and is it, hey, do you want a second opinion? What are some of the messages that you think are safe, and some safe havens in some of the areas you should really avoid?
Yeah, so just to give you like an example, before COVID happened, and I'm like obviously an early stage startup right now, our platform Quill is a marketplace for podcasters. And so we create podcasts for people and help people through their podcasting journey. And so one of like my outbound email outreaches were to ask if their companies have launched podcasts, or if they're considering it, or if an individual has considered launching a podcast and if they would be interested in it. After COVID, my messaging completely changed. And what I did was I created a 3-part webinar series. It's free, completely free to register for these webinars. I do them with Ria. So they're completely free. And the way I positioned it is everyone's at home. A lot of people are looking to start podcasts. If you're interested, feel free to, tune into this webinar, and I'll walk you through how you can launch a podcast from home, or how to grow your audience if you have a podcast right now. And it's very much feel free if you're interested, like no pressure. Here's the link. It's free to register. And by no means am I like looking to profit off this. Obviously, it's like a complete free resource that I'm doing. And so just like making sure that you're not being pushy at all. And it's not just about, being positive and not negative in your messaging and positioning, but also just that you're not being pushy. You're letting people know that the resource is available and they're free to tune in if they want. So I would say it's more so about how you position it. It's fine to put yourself out there, but you want to do it in a very tasteful and relevant way. Anything that isn't tied back to COVID or quarantining or self-isolation is almost tone deaf. So you have to really figure out how you can tailor your outreach in a way that people understand right off the bat. Oh, yes, that makes sense. This is why they're reaching out. This is very timely and topical. And while I may not be interested in it, I can see how people would be interested in it. So it's kind of an art to really figure out how that messaging can align. But I really, again, think about it from your perspective. And I find when you put yourself in people's shoes and really think about, well, if you're struggling financially, if you're worried about people's health and safety, what kind of emails would turn you off and what kind of emails would help uplift you? Usually when you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you can sort of articulate yourself a lot better in your messaging.
That makes a lot of sense. Almost more like a value first type outreach or something where you're trying to give something to somebody, and that's a little bit more, it's just a softer selling. You know, it's, hey, here's something of value. You might want to get to it. We can collect some info on you, and that could be a way for us to generate.
Absolutely. Like very soft. Like what I'll do sometimes is I'll write articles on everyone's home. If you're looking for content, here are 10 podcasts people should listen to. So not at all salesy. Just trying to, like, you know, really keep things lighthearted. And, you know, I can't tell you the amount of emails I've gotten from companies that I feel like are so tone deaf, where they're marketing their products and services. And I feel like the only people that have a pass right now are probably retail companies or like restaurants, brick and mortar stores, where they're really struggling to keep the lights on. And if they're promoting their products and services, I'm all for it. But, you know, if you have a digital company or an online company or your tech company, now is not the time to be looking to make a profit. Like, you shouldn't even, that's uncharted territory right now.
No, that makes a ton of sense. Just so I'm not hogging all the airspace too. If anybody's interested, you know, please feel free to ask questions on the chat. We're happy to jump in. I've got more, but you know, always good that I'm not hogging all the airtime. So okay, look, that makes a ton of sense. I think that's a powerful message and a good guide, you know, especially when you're reaching out, understanding where the sensitivities are. As I said before, you know, there's two major things that are under threat right now, you know, health and money. People are, I think, worrying about them likely equally in many circumstances, especially when health isn't an issue. If you're, you know, you're quarantined, you're safe, you're far away, you know, and you're not too fussed about any of that, and everything's kind of okay. Money's going to be the next thing that you're going to start thinking about, because it's kind of the next biggest headline, you know, recession and the, you know, markets and up and down and volatility and all this kind of stuff. So I think there's getting a lot of this is putting extra pressure on this industry in particularly. And then given that added pressure and the fact that markets are down, you know, to unprecedented, like, intense levels. I'm sure there's a million articles and things about it right now, but that's all. And everybody on this call will certainly know many reasons why, as they'll be getting from their asset managers and their firms recently. But given the fact that markets are down, it'll be a tough time for this industry in general. You know, how should an advisor be thinking about their brand during this time? You know, is it safe to assume that most brands are under threat? How can an advisor understand how their clients and prospects are thinking about them? Like, how do you know, okay, maybe the industry's under threat. Is it safe to say that me, James Rocket, the advisor's brand, is under threat? Or is there a way for me to understand more about how my actual clients think about me?
Yeah, so great question. When it comes to a brand, I feel like everyone has a personal brand and a company brand, and it's what people are saying about you when you're not in the room. So you might as well try to control that narrative and control the messaging. And, you know, in this particular case, you know, it's not, again, like, I think your brand or anyone's brand should be to stay top of mind. By no means am I saying that everyone should cut contact because they're not allowed to do sales. You definitely do want to stay top of mind. You are running a business, and you want to come out of this thinking that, if not financially, you brought your company to a better place, whether it's in the form of really good content, whether it's in the form of gaining client trust, whether it's in the form of becoming a thought leader and a subject matter expert in your particular industry. So definitely staying top of mind is important. And your brand should be about, you know, when people look back, your brand should be about, well, they provided us with some really great resources and support during a very difficult time period, or that they were very accessible. As a financial advisor or a company, they were very accessible. Anytime I reached out with support, they were happy to jump on a call. They did a series of webinars. They did Q&As, Ask Me, AMAs, which was Ask Me Anything. They used a lot of, you know, digital technologies. They're very ahead of their time, and just really putting clients first. Client service is so important, and that shouldn't be forgotten, especially during a time like this. So while your brand isn't necessarily about maybe, you know, saving you a lot of money during this difficult period, it should definitely be helping and holding clients' hands through and getting them through.
Yeah, I guess you could be seen and also in really good light if you do this well, because, you know, times are tough. Everybody's under a ton of strain, and if you're there providing a lot of support, obviously that's going to really kind of help you with your image and help people think about you as a resource, because, you know, during this difficult time, you're providing stuff. So it certainly is you're providing support. Sorry. So it certainly is an opportunity from that perspective to just really service your clients in a way where might go out on a limb and say that client servicing might be more impactful now than ever, because people feel more lost now than ever.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And, I think I'm seeing a period, it's sort of a trend where in the first few weeks this was happening, everyone sort of retreated because they were in limbo and no one was really saying or doing anything because, everyone was just adjusting to this new normal. And now I'm seeing a sort of a series of panic that's like setting into a lot of companies who are starting to really feel the financial pinch. And now more than ever, we have no idea when this is going to end. And it's like sort of become very real for us. And I think a lot of companies, unfortunately, are responding to that panic by almost bombarding people with too many emails and bombarding customers with emails, trying to like push sales and make a quick buck. And I just feel like that's so tone deaf, and really understanding that you probably will lose money during this difficult time. Everybody is going to lose money. As an economy, as a society, we're all going to struggle for a while. But it's what you do now that's going to impact how quickly you bounce back, and sort of the brand that you're going to build for yourself as becoming a thought leader, then someone who can be trusted, and that those sales will come back tenfold if you can really take the necessary steps now to be there for your clientele.
Yeah, somebody who's got that sort of careful, thoughtful, value first, not trying to sort of push sales type image right now are going to be able to benefit, because people are going to say, well, look, this person here was really for there for me when things were tough. And if somebody is looking for a recommendation, clients are obviously your best advocates. And so they if you're useful and helpful for them right now, you'll be able to see that rebound. What about trying to find ways, how do I understand potentially how some of my clients are feeling, it's okay to sort of ask, or how do I understand like their perception of me and my communication so far? Am I doing enough? Am I doing too much? Like, how do you sort of sense check that?
Yeah, so it depends on, I'm not sure how many clients your clientele have. So it's more so how big is your audience. The best is just like one-on-one approach, is reaching in and being like, hey, just wanted to check in. How are you? Just wanted to see if you're okay. If there's anything I can do to support you, happy to jump on a call and chat through things. Just really checking in, letting them know I'm here. And if like you're a larger organization, even having like an executive or the CEO of the company reaching out makes it so much more personal, and showing that you care, and just like being accessible. That's the thing. I don't think that there's a particular strategy or way. You could, if you're a really large company, you could definitely do a series of emails or webinars, or you could do a survey. But really, I would say the one-on-one outreach is probably the easiest. And it's interesting. I was writing an article recently for the Daily Hive. It got published last week, and it was about 10 companies that are supporting people through COVID. And each of those companies, and they're all local to Canada, but each of those companies had such a different strategy in the way that they were foregoing their profit to really be there, not just for their audience and clientele, but generally like the community. And I spoke to a lot of the founders of these companies that I profiled, and it's funny. They said that by doing good, they're getting so much support back. Like, that's another thing I think people don't realize, is that people start to notice after a while, and you become top of mind when it comes to what's an organization that I can trust. And even now, when for example, my partner and I were thinking about where do we want to eat out, I literally went through that list of companies that were supporting other people, and I'm like, let's pick vendors off of these lists, because these are the people that you want to support. So really remembering that by actually like being genuine and sincere in your approach, you're actually helping your sales pipeline.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think that, providing value to invest in it now and see it kind of return down the road is a big sort of recurring message that I think is important for people to realize now, is that, certainly you're doing it to help out, but that it's not like it's just complete time that you'll never get any return on. You're either going to maintain clients, you're going to potentially be that resource for people who can refer you in to other clients down the road. And then you also just will generally be helpful, which I think has a lot of value, especially right now, and especially with the expertise people have. Something that was important for me, and one of the things that kicked off this series, and the idea for the series, was that, we have a different perspective than our clients, and that we have, we think about things differently. Even though I can read a ton of articles about fintech and ideas and things in the space that our advisors aren't necessarily getting access to those channels. And in the same way, advisors are getting access to tons of info that might not feel like it's unique because you're getting bombarded with it right now. But remembering that you have a set of expertise and that you have a filter of those two, and you understand your clients better, so you know what's going to come up and be helpful to people, and it's going to get good traction. Or you can try a couple different ideas and see if that works. But the idea being, remember that you have a unique perspective and share it. You don't need to be Nobel laureate in economics to write an article about something. You can just kind of start on it, or you can collect other people's articles you think are helpful, try to combine that and just provide value.
I think that's really good advice. I guess, really my do's and don'ts would be really talk positively and emphasize the effectiveness of sort of the advice that you're providing, and really don't emphasize or dwell on the negative messages. I feel like the media is probably doing enough of a job of that. And I think everyone's job here should be really to bring down the panic and really provide as much support as possible in whatever capacity that you can.
No, that makes a ton of sense. Now, just one last question that I wanted to ask: if you have a client who's missing a major financial goal, the thing that I talk about when we're describing things is the S&P doesn't care when you want to buy a house, right? It's just going to occur, and everybody's aware of that for sure on the call. And I think if you have a client who's missed a major financial goal due to this, they're just getting ready and then things hit and now they can't buy that house, or they can't retire on time, or they've just been particularly poorly exposed to market. Maybe they needed that higher risk because they're a bit behind on retirement goals, and they took it knowing what's going to happen and knowing that they needed that upside, potentially catch it. For whatever reason, if you've got a client who's particularly affected right now, and particularly hurt right now by the economic and market conditions, how would you recommend interacting with them? And specifically, do you reach out? What are some safe messaging tactics for your hardest hit clients where there's a fair amount of pain?
It's funny you use that example, because that was exactly me. I was literally just in the process of purchasing a house, and then everything that happened. And I think for me, it's about being really solutions oriented. We can't really control these unforeseen circumstances, and we can't really control the outcomes right now either. But, coming to the table with a financial plan. So maybe you can't afford that house in the next 12 months, but let's project out 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. What are your alternatives? What are, some ways we can be creative in potentially still moving forward? Or, obviously people have very diverse portfolios. Are there things that we can do to sort of optimize certain portfolios over others, or certain categories? I don't know the right verbiage.
Yeah, no worries.
Categories, or maybe buying a house is no longer a priority in the next year, and we have to wait for those numbers to sort of climb back up, and we should be focusing on the opportunities of stocks are cheap right now. Maybe we want to invest more in ETFs, or it's a good time to buy, and so maybe we take some of your liquid cash. And so really coming to the table with options are really important for me. And I love it in situations like that when advisors reach out and they say, yep, this really sucks. We're so sorry this happened. We can really empathize with you. Here are some options that we can look at and we should be having conversations about. I think half of the battle is being proactive and really knowing that you're working through a solution and that you're doing something, rather than just sitting there and wallowing in despair, which I think everyone was doing in the first few weeks. But now it's time to be a little bit more action oriented and plan as much as we can given the situation.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. You've got a client who needs direction right now more than ever, and I think trying to come at them with some direction would be safe. So you'd recommend proactively reaching out, taking the bull by the horns, so to speak, or I guess the bear, so to speak, and going at it with them and coming out with a solution. Here's plans, here's next steps. Let's talk about
financial advisors. I think their job is to advise. And so
it's
not just about investing people's money and telling them where to put the money, but it's also advising them through situations like this. And it's like, I don't know what I don't know, and I'm not a financial expert. And so I am looking to my financial advisors to, of course, sympathize, but more than that, I want people to come to the table with solutions and say, here are 4 different things that we should be looking at that can help you in the long run, whether it's purchasing more stock because it's a cheap time to buy, or reassurance things will climb back up, and maybe reevaluating what purchasing my first house will look like, or what I can afford.
No, that makes a ton of sense. So I'm just looking here at a couple things. A couple questions came through just quickly on whether or not this is being recorded. It is, so we will provide this as well as a summary article just for people if they missed it or looking for some of the key highlights. I think there's a ton of really good information here. I think more importantly, there's a ton of like high level framework type info of, you know, things I always look for is, okay, every situation is unique. So give me a framework that I can just, you know, kind of walk into something and do a bit of guidance there. So I think we have that, and we'll make sure we provide that afterwards. If there are no other questions, just sort of a blank thing, you know, one should ask, is there anything you'd recommend as far as just high level that we haven't touched on, you think would be relevant? Or I think we covered off most things. So, you know, a bit out of my depth when it comes to PR. So I'm always kind of curious, was there any other messages you wanted to get across today?
You know, similar to when you're advising your clients, like today may not be a really good time to purchase that house, but there's other ways that you can look at, you know, supporting them and helping them prepare for long-term financial well-being. I similarly look at your business like that as well. This may not necessarily be an optimal time for sales and making money and bringing on new clients. But what you can do is use this time to focus on other aspects of the business that you may have neglected or not had time for, like content, like becoming thought leaders, like pitching to media, creating really great resources for your website, and finding some time to reconnect with your clients in a way that may not be as salesy and transactional as, you know, it may have once been.
Oh, look, I think that makes a ton of sense, and that's a great a great strategy and a great kind of ending comment. So thank you so much. Before we wrap up, there is one thing, you know, in this line of discussions and trying to add value. We're going to continue on with this expert series. Following next week, it will actually be a call with me. It will be hosting tech tools that we found that we use. You know, we serve a lot of clients digitally. Obviously, it's our primary. So we'll be going through things like just based on, you know, basic webinar software. What's our preferred one? Obviously, we're using Zoom today. Is that the one we'd recommend all the time? As well as, you know, how do we do surveys and online discussions? You know, any tool we've used, we found value in the past, even down to like, what's the workout app we're using that we think is useful? Just different ways we've seen tech, because we have understood, you know, through this whole process and chatting with you and thinking about, you know, having a bit extra time, you know, what are some of the areas or expertise that we probably have that don't get exposure to financial advisors and to our clients. So we will be continuing this on next Thursday. We'll send out some information there at the end of people who are interested in registering. But that's it from our perspective. See no other questions coming in. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks everybody for joining. We really appreciate it. I think there are really, really good, useful, actionable items here that people can use. And we hope that we found it as, you know, people find a lot of value in it, which I think they will.
Thank you so much for moderating, James. Really appreciate it. And stay safe, everyone.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.